Right, for more on this, we're now joined via Zoom by Energy Expert Ted Blom to weigh in on the Eskom energy crisis. Mr. Blom, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, evening peak supply constraints continue to be under pressure. I mean, this is a concern given that the winter season is upon us, and as it stands, South Africans are literally in the dark. Any idea if this will go beyond the 60 days that was initially envisaged by Eskom? And I'm just listening to what the CEO has to say, is that we shouldn't be accepting this situation as a new kind of normal, but it's certainly very difficult not to.
Good afternoon. No, certainly, I think you got a very good point there. And unfortunately, Eskom has not been transparent with the public. It has not taken the public into its confidence. But a few weeks ago, during one of these similar State of the Nation briefings by Eskom, they put in a new person on the podium, and he inadvertently admitted that in his calculations, and he's in charge of scheduling the load shedding, he was foreseeing more than 101 days of load shedding. And then after that, I got a hold of Eskom's maintenance schedule. And the maintenance schedule went from April, in other words, last month, to April next year. And in that schedule, Eskom's own data shows that they expect load shedding to be very likely for more than 48 weeks out of 52 weeks. So you can take your angle from that as to what to expect going forward. But that certainly doesn't look very promising. And in fact, everything that Eskom says in terms of their promises, I mean, just a week ago, their spokesperson guaranteed South Africa that they had 35 gigawatts of power available, and that it would be more than adequate for the winter. And it would be more than the 34 gigawatts peak that they anticipated. And yet, less than a week later, we can't even generate 27 gigawatts of power. So there's something very remiss within the Eskom household, in that the one arm doesn't know what the other arm is promising the public. So whatever Mr. De Ruyter said at this meeting this morning, I personally take with a pinch of salt.
48 out of the 52 weeks. I mean, my thoughts immediately go to businesses and business owners and the economy of this country. Now, earlier in the day, the CEO, of the entity did mention that they are now getting a little bit more of somewhat of the maintenance matters at the problematic power stations. Now, you've mentioned the maintenance schedule. Should Eskom not, at the very least, be sharing these schedules with the public, for one, to manage expectations?
No, absolutely. I mean, everybody knows they're in trouble. They've been in trouble for 15, this is the 15th year. But the causes of the problems are a little bit different. The problems in 2007, 2008 was the advent of major corruption within Eskom, especially on the coal account. So it was coal shortages in those days. But ever since 2014, in other words, after they didn't do maintenance after the World Cup for 4 years, the problems have been on the equipment side, and that's been exacerbated by the corruption on the coal side, where Eskom has bought under-spec coal, and that has accelerated the wear and tear on even the new units. I mean, I'm led to believe that Kusili's life of its boilers has been halved by the feeding of sub-spec coal and high abrasive material into those boilers. So, yes, if Eskom had just been honest and transparent with us, you and I as business people and as household heads would have been able to take or can take alternative measures and either close our businesses, if that's what's called for, because it's not sustainable under such a load-shedding burden, or else make alternative arrangements to bring in our own power. The government's raised the ceiling to 100 megawatts of own generation, and they wonder why everybody hasn't jumped at it. Well, it's very difficult to justify to your board to go and spend billions on your own power generation equipment when Eskom keeps on telling you that they're fixing the thing up and it's going to be fixed up shortly. We need some measure of honesty from the company so that we know we're in the trouble and we can justify spending that extra money and taking contingent measures to get off the grid or do whatever is necessary to keep our businesses alive.
As we wrap, Mr. Blom, and very, very quickly, a state of emergency has been suggested on Eskom. What purpose would this serve?
Well, I was the one who initially, I think, suggested the state of emergency, and I really think the situation is very, very dire. And I have respect for the people who had a state of emergency because of the floods and so on, but this affects the whole nation. And we're going to put more people unemployed on the streets because of this mess by Eskom. So on the basis of that, if we can declare a state of emergency in the power area, we can then rope in people to come to the party and have a clear table as to what's required, who's going to do what, and what we can do to ameliorate the situation. But at the moment, everybody's sitting on their hands and waiting and waiting and waiting. As even Uber also said this morning, the time for waiting and talking is over. The crisis is real and the crisis is now. And it's time that everybody catches a wake up and takes the necessary measures. We as South Africans are very resilient, and we've been very patient with Eskom. It's 15 years now of this nonsense and corruption and incompetence and you name it. It's time that we get together, clear the decks, stop the politicking and all this other nonsense of red tape and bureaucracy and lying and passing the buck and so on. It's time to get real, sit around the table. I'm ready. I'm putting my hand up. I'm ready to do my next national service for this country. But then I need to have honest people around the table who are all dedicated to fixing up the problem as soon as possible.
Absolutely. All right. Energy expert there, Ted Blom, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.